So I want to welcome everybody. Andy is taking time out from his normal 9 a.m. Physical fitness events to join us today, and we're basically the idea of this was kind of just a little introductory chat before a couple of uh, 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 other commemorations and activities as we launch a archive for the plug-in hybrid campaign at UC Davis. And Dahlia and Andy are at Davis right now. And basically, we're going to start building this archive, and a core part of it is Andy's work at UC Davis. And so we have Dahlia, who worked with him there, and Mark Duval will come a little later. And I thought I'd turn it over to Dahlia to just start a conversation. We don't really have much structure here, but we just want to, start talking about the uh, for Andy, the 50-year history of the arrival of plug-in hybrids.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for inviting me. I haven't been on one of these calls. I joined something kind of similar, the Strong PHEV Coalition that still is working for better PHEVs. But I appreciate being asked to join today and asked to moderate a discussion with you, Dr. Frank. So we're going to go way back. We're going to start at the beginning. What brought you to UC Davis? What were you excited to do or try or build when you first came to Davis?
Well, I had built a plug-in hybrid at the University of Wisconsin. I was there for 15 years as a professor in electrical engineering. However, after 15 years, I didn't fit in the electrical engineering department because I was interested in building hybrid electric cars. And I built my first plug-in hybrid, which consisted for the Department of Transportation, which had a contest for universities to find a car that would greatly increase fuel economy. And so my goal at that time was to build a car, a plug-in hybrid that could achieve 100 miles per gallon. So the 100 miles per gallon number was introduced at that contest. And that is incidentally, for that contest, the car I built at the University of Wisconsin was a ground up car that we built. I mean, we started at the wheels and we built the whole car, and the powertrain consisted of a Wonko engine running on propane, a electric motor, which was nothing but a starter motor generator from a B-17, I think. And that was the electric motor, and a power split transmission, much like the Toyota Prius. And that was 1970, 71, and 72. However, there were no more contests, and the university was not. Oops. Anyway, the university was supportive, but not nearly as. So I decided to change universities, and the University of California, Davis accepted me. Maybe a little reluctantly, but nevertheless, they needed a professor to teach mechanical design and teach the students how to make things. So I said I could do that. So I started but I had to build the program from scratch. And in order to build a car program from scratch, I decided to enter the student contest called the Super Mileage Car, where you're given a 2 horsepower gasoline engine from Briggs & Stratton, a lawnmower engine, and you're supposed to build a car around that and make it make as many miles per gallon as possible on the CHP test track. It's an oval track right here in Sacramento. You had to go around it, I believe, 7 or 8 miles, so that I even out all the wind effects, et cetera, et cetera. So if Mark Duvall is on, he was the leader of one of the latest ones, and we set a record at 3,300 miles per gallon on that particular car.
That's pretty amazing. So it sounded like your first plug-in hybrid at Wisconsin took about 3 years to build from the ground up. Is that right?
Yeah, but actually we built it in 1 year.
Okay.
We did the contest, and then we displayed it because it was such a revolution to the rest of the universe. I mean, the auto industry never saw anything like that. So
you were the only plug-in hybrid back then too, yeah?
That's right.
Okay.
No one even thought about the concept at that moment.
Yeah.
But I had done a lot of research in the area, and I found out that hybrids and plug-in hybrids even were actually invented around 1910.
Mm-hmm.
And because the early cars were all electric, when the Model T came along with Ford, that was the first time gasoline cars became cost effective. Before that, electric was, and people never drove more than 5 miles a day. So an electric car was perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the idea of mixing the gasoline car and the electric car came to pass. And the company I dug out was called Woods Electric, and it was located in Wisconsin.
Okay. Fun coincidence there.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask you about what made you apply to the DOE Advanced Technology competitions, but I think I'm going to rephrase that because I didn't realize that you were working on DOT-funded student competitions before DOE-funded competitions. So I guess what was it about student competitions that you felt was valuable or helpful for your passion for efficiency?
Yes, that's very good, because at the time, the auto companies would not support fuel economy. They didn't want fuel economy. They want to sell as much gasoline as they could. Anyway, and gasoline, incidentally, was 19 cents a gallon. So we were essentially wasting it. And DOT saw the Japanese cars come in, and they were getting 25, 30 miles per gallon. And the average American car in 1970 was about 12 miles per gallon. And that differential was, it was a 2-to-1 differential at least. And so the U.S. Department of Transportation said, well, let's see what the universities can do. And that's why they started it. Anyway, so I decided to build a plug-in hybrid because I set the goal at 100 miles per gallon. And you couldn't achieve that with conventional technology of the day. So That got me started. We never achieved 100 miles per gallon, of course, in the car that I built. However, we did achieve 35 miles per gallon, which wasn't too bad compared to conventional cars. Anyway, of the day. So that got me started. And in the meantime, I discovered hybrid cars is a great idea. And on paper, we could construct a car to get 100 miles per gallon. However, the technology to get that was yet to be developed.
Yeah.
That was the goal. The first thing we needed, I discovered, was batteries. Because the batteries that I used were diesel truck batteries, and they would last about 3 or 4 deep discharges. And they weighed 300 or 400 pounds. Anyway, the point is, they were totally impractical. So after I worked on that, I decided to work on energy storage. And there's a phase of my story that is completely left out, because instead of building a hybrid electric car, I decided to build a flywheel energy storage car using the same principle as a plug-in hybrid. The only difference was that the flywheel could be either charged from electricity or by the gasoline engine. I built a flywheel hybrid for the next 5 years. And I built one for Ford, and I built one for General Motors. When I took the flywheel hybrid, put into a Ford Pinto to Ford, and demonstrated that it worked just like a regular car, except it got double the fuel economy, 25, 30 miles per gallon. The executives took a ride and they said, yeah, this car accelerates pretty good and so on and so forth. But it's too noisy. Walked out. And that was the end of the project.
That's an abrupt end to all that work.
Anyway, that was at Ford. Then General Motors said, well, let us give us a try. So I built the second car in a Pontiac Phoenix, and that had a more advanced flywheel, but nevertheless, in the middle of the project, I think President Reagan became president, and all funding for Department of Transportation went to zero. They were zeroed out. So I lost the contract, and as a result, the Pontiac Phoenix was never finished for General Motors because that depended on the government funds, and but it was finished for Toyota Motors. They heard about the project, and they said, well, we'll finish it for you. And however, the terms of the contract was, at the end of the project, I had to let them have the car so they can evaluate it. Well, that was a big mistake because I didn't sign all terms and agreements. I should have had a lawyer working. Anyway, that's something I learned.
Yeah, the campus nowadays would never let you sign off on everything like that, I think.
Anyway, but this was the early days. So they took the car, and the car came back with lots of instrumentation, with lots of Japanese writing, but absolutely no information No idea what it did, what it didn't do.
Okay. Interesting.
Nevertheless, that was the end of that project. And that's when I moved to University of California, Davis.
Okay. So I thought we would kind of go through some of the kind of key accomplishments. And I feel like this might be a little bit like a quiz for how well you remember some of the key takeaways from each of the vehicles that you've built through the years. And I encourage anybody who's on to jump in or raise their hand if you have any follow-up questions. So the super mileage vehicle you mentioned already started with a 2-horsepower engine, and one of those years you got 3,300 miles per gallon. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay. So after the super mileage, what came next, and kind of what was the main accomplishment or major achievement from the next vehicle?
Well, so at that time, I think President Clinton became president after Reagan, and Al Gore was his vice president. So Al Gore said, it's atrocious that we have such low fuel economy in our cars, and the rest of the world is moving ahead of us. So Al Gore started a program that he called Partnership for a New Generation of Vehicle, PNGV. And the objective was to build cars that could get 80 miles per gallon. So he let the American car companies try. And no one was able to do that with the conventional technology. So they decided to adopt a hybrid as a way to achieve that 80 miles per gallon. Well, after 2 years, they were not very successful, and they invited the universities to see what the students might come up with. And of course, I entered immediately. And so we built the first plug-in hybrid for that particular contest. I was 1988 or 89, I believe. And but we built the car ground up. And after we built the car, which, by the way, the powertrain consisted of nickel cadmium batteries, 18 horsepower, 2-cylinder Briggs & Stratton engine, because I had all that experience with Briggs & Stratton. And so Briggs & Stratton gave me that engine, and we put that and a transmission all together in a special body car. And
was that the one Aftershock?
That's Aftershock.
Okay.
Yes. And of course, we won the contest, and so EPA said, that's an interesting concept. We'd like to measure the emissions. So they said, bring it to our laboratory in El Monte, California. So we decided, instead of transporting the car we'll drive it. We'll put it together and we'll have a special tank and just drive it and then go ahead and measure the fuel economy and emissions, etc. So we did that, and on the way back, the Department of Energy said, now we've got the laboratory tests on this, but that's not real data. So let's see what it does to go from Los Angeles back to Davis and stop at Bakersfield and Fresno for demonstrations out like a real drive from Los, that's 400 miles. Anyway, we did that. And I think we got here to Davis, and I think we measured 72 miles per gallon. and the
That's pretty amazing. Yeah.
yeah. So the car companies looked at it and then scratched their head.
Get everybody thinking.
Said, wait,
Yeah.
this isn't a real car, because it was all made from scratch with aluminum body and blah, 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 blah.
Right. Right.
Didn't meet the safety standards. So here's a real car. So I can see the real car sitting in your background, that picture right over
That's
you.
Jewel. Yeah, I have Jewel up on the wall.
So listen, let's see what you can do with a real car.
Yeah. So that leads us to the HEB challenge. That was Jewel and Coulomb, the Ford Taurus and the Mercury Sable, right?
Yeah.
And those were, if I recall, 1994 to 1998 era.
Right.
Okay.
We got the Jewel, which was a Ford Taurus, 1994, a brand new.
Mhm.
And our job was to convert it into a plug-in hybrid. And immediately I could see the 18 horsepower gasoline engine wasn't going to cut it.
Not enough. Yeah.
So what I did is I looked around the world and I found a 3-cylinder 600cc engine, because in Japan they have a Kai car class. Kai car means light, and it's 600cc is the limit of the engine. So their passenger cars built that meet emission standards in Japan, which were pretty stringent. Nevertheless, the point is that Honda made a 3-cylinder gasoline engine, 600 cc's, and we used that particular engine to put into the Ford Taurus.
Mhm.
And I think the peak power was 65 horsepower. Anyway, but that's from a 600 cc's compared to a 3-liter engine. So we put that engine and unique mobility, 100 horsepower, 75 kilowatt electric motor, and a transmission into the Ford Taurus. And amazingly enough, that car, we did a lot of modifications, including a set of batteries that sit under the floor. They were metal hydride batteries. From Unique Mobility, from
Those were Ovonics?
Ovonics, yeah.
Did they have a different name at the time?
No, it was always
Okay.
Ovonics. Stan Ovshinsky is the one who founded the Ovonic Battery Company, and he had a contract with General Motors to build the Ovonic battery for the EV1, and
Right.
that's what he was working on.
Okay.
We got one of the early Ovonic batteries from Ovonics company. Anyway, the point is, I had to pay for that, by the way. So
Those were not cheap.
yeah, they were not. I paid over $100,000 in those days, and unfortunately, I didn't have $100,000. So, but I had a contract with the Department of Transport. I had a contract with the Department of. It was ARPA, and ARPA had some extra funds that were administered through SMUD, Sacramento Municipal Electric. So anyway, who were interested in pure electric cars. So I managed to put together a proposal, and that money came through. So I had that $100,000 I could use to buy the batteries. Ovonics.
Made it work.
That was the
What
whole
batteries
thing.
were the Ovonics?
Yes, that's where the Ovonics battery.
They're nickel metal hydride.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they're early nickel metal hydride. Anyway, the point is, we managed to build those batteries into the car, the Ford Taurus, and put it under the floor. And this was 1994, 1995. And
yeah, this one, that's
yeah, there it
the
is.
reflection's not so good, but that's
we did it. You can see we did a lot of body modifications.
Yep.
That nose is completely new. The tail is completely new.
Yeah.
Windows are the same.
Yeah, what's amazing to me is that we've gotten now to the point where we have innovations in our vehicles, little things that you don't really think about making a big difference in fuel economy, like the lack of door handles on Teslas, right? That was on this car. There are no door handles on this car. It had a tiny button under the window on the vehicles on each door. And the team minimized the mirrors, so it had cameras that projected. So when you hit your blinker, it showed you the camera feed inside the cab. This is super standard now, but these were 30 years ago. And the automakers took a little while to catch up.
Yes.
Right?
So, by the way, Eric Chateau did a lot of those things.
Yeah.
And Eric is now working for the French electric bus companies.
Oh, excellent. Okay. Yeah, no, I think this is one of those things where you have, and maybe this brings us back to earlier, the reason for having a student competition, in my experience, was that we were sort of unburdened by the rules and the processes that automakers went through, right? We had the chance to be creative and do like weird and wild things that you don't see in cars, but we're innovative enough to be eventually modified, or show up years later in vehicles. And I think, automakers just don't have the flexibility that universities do when they're doing these like student design projects. You see, like, it's not just about the powertrain, it was about the whole thing around the vehicle. Yeah.
Wow. You know what? Dahlia, that was music to my ears.
Well, I'm trying to bring it back to the next round of students, right? We're doing the same thing, but this time they don't get to do a whole lot of powertrain modifications. They're starting with an EV and making an EV, but the innovations are going to come in how they build out more accessible features, more automated features, more driver safety features. Like, there's still the opportunity for students to be really innovative in these design projects, where when you're regimented and following an automotive company design process, you don't get to do. I will say, I think the specs on Joule and Coulomb were about 60 miles per gallon.
That's right.
And I don't remember the EV range, but something like a 50-mile range, right?
More than that, 60.
Yeah, 60-mile range and about 60 miles per gallon. So they were doing equal to or better than the best PHEVs on the road right now.
And
To be
you
fair,
can
their
pull,
battery
and you can
packs were
actually
100
pull them,
grand.
You could actually call them strong hybrids, strong
Yeah.
PHEVs.
Yes.
At the time, I don't know that we called them that. I remember them just being hybrids. Like ours was a hybrid. It was a hybrid that plugged in, and
That's right.
Dean was probably around the time where there was a differentiation. I think he was involved in the naming.
Actually, Dean Taylor is the guy who
Yeah.
went with the plug-in.
And I hate to say, but Andy was calling them battery dominant hybrids, and I didn't like that name. And Tom Kickett was calling them grid connected hybrids, and I didn't
Right.
like that name. So it took about 5 years to finally get people. I think finally Alan Lloyd started agreeing with me and using the name plug-in hybrid, and it finally took off.
Right.
But Tom and Ken, we hired to do a report in 1997, and kind of just hypothetically on paper, what are the benefits of a plug-in hybrid? And that's when we first published the name plug-in hybrid, I think.
Yeah. That sounds about right, because I think when I started working, we were still calling them hybrids and everybody built hybrids, and ours was just the only one that plugged in. Okay, so moving kind of down the list, I think
Jerry, quick question if I can.
Of course.
Yeah, when you spent the $100,000 on the batteries, how many kilowatt hours did that yield you? Do you know? Do you remember?
Oh, yeah, there were, I think it was about 21, 22 kilowatt hours of batteries. Well, the reason for that is the metal hydride battery power density is low. So in order to make 100 kilowatts of electric power, you had to have those batteries. Well, if you have those batteries, I mean, you had to have that many kilowatt hours of batteries. Otherwise, you can't produce because of the power density of the battery itself. So in order to produce 100 kilowatts, you had to have about 20 kilowatt hours of batteries. So anyway, that's
what year was that? What year was that, Andy?
That was 1994, 1995.
Wow. Thank you.
So that was the car that Dahlia just showed Jewel. Incidentally, in order to build the bodywork, we had to get a autoclave to be able to form that one-piece hood. So the whole front end of the car was one piece, and that was formed in an autoclave at the McClellan Air Force Base. They used it for forming aircraft parts. Anyway, that's where we formed the nose of the Jewel, and then the tail end of the Jewel. Incidentally, even though we had all those batteries in the car in the Ford Taurus, it had a trunk that was bigger than the original trunk. So you could put the spare tire in it.
Mm-hmm.
Why was that? Out of curiosity.
What?
For aerodynamics, the trunk was extended longer, actually. So it didn't get shorter and the batteries were under the floor, the main floor of the vehicle. To kind of smooth the aerodynamics on the back of the vehicle, the trunk got a little longer.
Yeah. And
it's not visible in my picture, unfortunately.
Yeah, we cheated a little too, because the clearance of the Ford Taurus was 8 or 10 inches, I believe, but we shortened that to 6 inches the minimum. So the extra 2 inches of lower car gave us better aerodynamics, and it also gave us space to put the batteries. So anyway, it all worked together. This is what designing a car from scratch is all about.
Yep.
Did you have a wind tunnel to work out the aerodynamics?
What?
Did you have
Not,
a wind tunnel to work out the aerodynamics?
Oh, well, we actually didn't do the correct modeling, but we did it by seat of the pants technique. Fundamentally, we eliminated all sharp corners and minimized the disturbances, air disturbances, so the air could flow over the body very smoothly. So we measured the drag coefficient at the GM proving grounds, and I forgot what it was, but it was like something like 0.20 or something, very close to the EV1 had a 0.19, but this was very close to the EV1.
yeah, we didn't have access to anything big enough to test the aerodynamics on the vehicle, but I know at least when I was working on the trucks, we would do coast down testing with instrumentation to try to measure aerodynamics and to check how different things affected. We were still doing aerodynamic improvements or attempting to do them on Chevy Suburbans, which was when I started working on the team. So that takes us to 2000. I guess it would have started in 1999 to 2000. The competition was in 2000 and 2001 with the Suburban, and then the Explorer. And I guess, what do you remember? What were the takeaways from those vehicles?
Well, the Suburban was, again, we used the same powertrain as in the Ford. No, excepting we used a bigger gasoline engine. Instead of the 600cc engine, we used a European General Motors engine. It was a 4-cylinder, was a 2-liter.
Yeah, it was a Saturn engine, if I recall.
Yeah, well, turned out to be the Saturn, but before, when we got it, it was actually only made in Europe for the European Chevrolet or something. Anyway, the point is, it was a 2-liter engine. We used that engine plus the 100 horsepower unique mobility motor, plus a Corvette transmission, 5-speed, that gave us a couple of extra gears. And again, the same batteries, and we put those batteries under the floor of the Suburban. That was easy. So anyway, the point is that car was tested at General Motors in a way to their amazement. And we did the entire off-road test on battery power only, and they didn't believe it because the so-called off-road testing was kind of rigorous, and it was maybe 5 or 6 miles or something, but it's up and down hills. But we did that all on electric, no gasoline engine at all, and that sort of amazed everyone. Anyway, so
I think those got about 30 miles per gallon.
I think it was 34, yeah.
Okay.
Something like that.
And also had on the order of 40-mile range.
Yeah, about 35, 40 miles range. Anyway, after that, Ford says, well, give us a try. And they gave us a Ford Explorer, which was a smaller car. Fundamentally, what they were saying, try it on this car because you had all that space in the Suburban. Now let's see what you can do with a real car. So we did. We put it all into the Ford Explorer. And again, but we made the Ford Explorer 4-wheel drive, as I remember. And one of the tricks that my students were trying to do was to show the power of that system, was to show that it could do a four-wheel, spin all four wheels at the stop sign. And my students broke a lot of dry shafts.
It was powerful. We broke a couple half shafts at the acceleration events.
Anyway, so that was in a Ford Explorer. And then, and those contests were called the Future Truck Contest. So that took us to about 2005 or so, to 2010 maybe.
I think that one ended in 2000. The last competition was 2004, if I recall, and then 2005 was the Challenge X. That was the Equinox, I think.
Oh yeah.
The Equinox was a little bit different. I wasn't involved in that one.
Well, it was because it was front wheel drive.
Okay. Did it have a different fuel as well?
I don't think so, but there was a lot of discussion of whether we should make it flex fuel. And but General Motors was working on that. They decided not to. But
yeah, at the time, around 2003, 4, 5, that was when ethanol, corn ethanol in particular, was really popular politically.
Yeah.
Because it was homegrown. And so I know the Explorer, we did make flex fuel so that it could run on ethanol.
Right.
And I think the Equinox may have been as well, although I was not involved in that one.
Yeah, something.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So you spent a lot of years working with student teams. What was it like working with different teams and I guess different personalities, what was that like?
Well, my management style was very much hands-off, but I would come in every day. I would take a look at what was being done, and I would criticize, or I would suggest, and we would make changes either on the spot or make changes as we saw fit. But we would always discuss it, and I had a lot of feedback, positive and negative, about that, because oftentimes a student that didn't agree with me. And one particular leader, I think it was Brian Johnson. He was a little earlier. Anyway, he was working. We were working on Joe, and he said, "This engine only makes 60 horsepower. I can put in an electric clutch from an air conditioner, a 60 horsepower commercial air conditioner. That'll be good enough." Well, I told him, no, it won't be good enough. And on our trip from Detroit to Washington, D.C., that's what broke. Didn't make it. Anyway.
Well, they were handmade. They did have a tendency to break in various ways and in various inopportune locations. I think we're gonna go a little bit to the project you were involved with, EPRI, and the working group that produced a major report on the costs and benefits of plug-in hybrids around 2000. Can you tell us about that report and what the key takeaways were?
Oh, I'm not sure about the report, but EPRI at that time was run by Bob Graham, I think. It was the head of the electric vehicle division or something. Anyway, Bob Graham saw what we were doing, and essentially Bob Graham hired Mark Duvall kind of to replace himself. So Bob Graham retired, and Mark Duvall took over his position. So that's how all of that started. Anyway, the report, I'm not sure whatever happened to it. I didn't follow that up very carefully.
Does anybody here remember that report?
Yeah, I should chime in. It's a bigger deal than Andy realizes, maybe, that because it took like 3 years. It was probably $3 million or something like that being raised. DOE was involved, CARB was involved. General Motors, Mark Kasowski was there to basically try to kill plug-in hybrids and EVs in one fell swoop. Dave Hermance was kind of behind the scenes helping, so was Ford a little bit. Dave Hermance was with Toyota at the time. So, and this report covered everything: the costs, the benefits, the consumer research, everything. Everybody was drunk on fuel cells at the time. So this report ended up having a pretty long shelf life. Andy and I gave copies to the Chinese Ministry of Industry and Technology back in 2000 or 2001 when the report was done. It eventually actually made it all the way to the President Bush back in 2005. And supposedly the story goes, that's why he put it in the State of the Union address in 2006, was because of that report.
I remember working at Edison and being very surprised that President Bush actually mentioned the technology in that speech. Just shocked.
We never have found out exactly why. James Woolsey says it was probably George Shultz that gave the report to him, but he evidently beat up DOE and said, I want this technology. And, DOE was beholden to the car companies at the time. And this was a big deal, I think, both. And then the other thing that happened is that I remember Tom Turrentine told me we have to go to Japan because of President Bush said, I want plug-in hybrids. So the Japanese automaker said, we're going to do them. So EPRI organized a big event in late 2006 in Japan. Like 500 people showed up. I was the main organizer of that event, and it was all about because of Bush saying that, and turned out to be true. The Japanese wanted to do plug-in hybrids. So
Actually,
they evidently had done that also regarding the PNGV. That's how, the origin of how the original Insight and Prius happened, is because of the partnership for next generation vehicle. The Japanese automakers took it seriously and the Americans didn't.
Well, actually, the Japanese automakers wanted to join the PNGV program with Al Gore, but Al Gore basically, the State Department basically said, no way, this is for American car companies only. So
I would also just add on this report we're talking about, we never could have done it without Andy and Mark and Rob Scherhoff, because it was just me and I didn't know enough of the stuff. And Mark Kasowski from General Motors would come with like 500 overhead transparencies on, engine maps and all these details. And we needed the expertise of Andy to stand up to, Kasowski. The irony is now Kasowski for the last 10 years has been working for EPRI. So. And it did lead to basically Mark eventually, I think in 2005, 2006, somewhere in there, leaving Andy and going over to EPRI.
Yeah, for some reason, we've never been able to get Mark on these calls. We should try to find him if he's still around.
He's still around, and we'll try next time.
Yeah, we tried to get him today. His daughter had a conflicting appointment that he said he might be able to join us, but late. But it looks like he couldn't make it. So, but he is still around. And if you recall, Chris Carday, who did a lot of the telematics work, So Mark Duvall now works with Chris Carday and his charging company, his new startup charging company, Hey Charge,
Oh, good.
which is based in Germany, in Munich. So yeah, big influence coming out of UC Davis. And I think, well, I'm going to ask one more question. I was going to say, I think it's only appropriate that we're kind of launching this archive at UC Davis about the history of PHEVs. We're excited about that. I am thrilled that the library is on board because I have no idea how to do an archive appropriately. And so they know how to do that. And they were completely on board with hosting that for all of us, really. So I'm going to ask, I think, one more question, Dr. Frank, if that's okay.
Sure.
If you had to go back and do anything differently, would you?
You know, yeah, probably a lot of things, but you have to remember that, and I did what could be done at the moment, and I tried to push the moment to the limit of the technology at that time. So, for example, when I couldn't find batteries, I built the flywheel.
Mm-hmm.
When that turned out to be having lots of negative consequences, I went back to batteries. And in the meantime, so these are the kinds of opportunities that occur. And relative to one of your first questions, what was good about the student contest? What was good about it and why I used it was because the funding to start a student contest is zero. And oftentimes when I first started these contests, the students raised the funds.
Mm-hmm.
I had people knocking on restaurant doors to raise funds for the year's project. And so the students learn the management part of the design process as well as the mechanical design process itself.
Yeah.
So
I think that flexibility was, I mean, I don't think you could have done anything differently other than adjust to the technology and what was available at the time.
Yeah.
Ron, did you have a follow-up?
Yes. Andy, when and how did you develop and invent your variable transmission?
Oh, the CVT. That is something I've been working on for during the flywheel days. In order to make a flywheel work mechanically, you need a continuously variable transmission that could transmit power both ways, in and out, at a simple control. And in order to do that, you needed, so they had variable V-belts. You remember the Dutch car called the DAF? It was a variable V-belt. It's like a snowmobile drive. And that was great, but rubber is not a good media for power transmission because their losses are pretty high. Nevertheless, you could do it metal to metal. So we decided to build metal to metal continuously variable transmissions. And the Dutch had the best technology. So I had a partner in Holland, Dr. Jacques van Roy. Anyway, he and I designed mechanical CVTs. The last ones we designed were patented by Jacques was over 500 kilowatts. That's for big machinery and continuously variable gears with an efficiency equivalent to mechanical gears, 95% plus.
So the detour through flywheels had a very valuable result.
Oh, yes, amongst other things. So all the technologies kind of meld into one as time goes on. But you try things, you develop things up to a certain point. You begin to see the limitations and what people will accept and what people will not accept. One thing, by the way, about flywheels, what I discovered was that, unfortunately, physics is not well understood by engineers at all. So the physical laws, for example, the conservation of momentum. If you read the physics book, they say momentum is always conserved, but you don't know why, and you don't know how. And what does that mean relative to a flywheel, which is spinning at 100,000 RPM? Suddenly it comes to a stop because of some explosion or something. There was momentum there. Well, what happened to the momentum? Because that's got to be conserved. Well, momentum has to go into something. Anyway, the point is that was one fundamental error of the flywheel research that the Department of Energy constructed for over 10 years. The physicists never understood that. For example, they said the flywheel made of composite materials spinning at 100,000 RPM because the composites could stand that. When it broke up, it would break up into little fibers, and the little fibers would not be harmful. Well, that's not quite true. You have to first have little fibers. Anyway, the point is, that was proven so over and over again, because every time one of those flywheels blew up, even made of little fibers, there would be a gigantic explosion. And
Oh, so
that,
we're around time,
yeah,
and so
well,
so I think just a couple things to say here. The first is that when we started CalCars and started working with the whole EV advocate world, we all agreed that we wanted to have a plug-in hybrid on the market before Andy retired. And we made that goal. And now, Andy, you're going to be 90 in September, and it's so great that we're kind of in a position now to celebrate how far we've come. There are going to be a couple of events at ABS 36 in Sacramento in next week, and we hope that Andy will be at the EV gathering, advocates gathering on Sunday, and the Institute of Transportation Studies event on Wednesday. And so we're looking forward to all those things, and we'll get this video and a transcript out to the people on this call, and then to a larger group. And I hope we'll be able to do some more audio, video interviews with people about this story, because there's so many people who have great stories about it.
yeah, thank you very much for doing all this, Felix. It's great.
Yeah. Okay, so I think thank you, Dahlia. You were fantastic, because you just you have it all in your head about what happened when. And I will say, I'm 15 years younger than you, Andy, but I am awed at how much is in your head, at all the numbers and the statistics and the sequences that you've got it all, and so you're an incredible resource for all of us as we're looking to tell this story.
Yeah, so long as this thing keeps going.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Felix, for your leadership, organizing everything, and your persistence, and yeah, appreciate it.
And Well, I thank you, Dahlia, for doing this. This is great.
Thanks. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you,
Alrighty.
everybody.
I guess have a good day, everybody. Bye-bye.